Welcome to the Story of Liberty. This is your host, John Bona. There's a non-conforming church, they call it, that has gathered in London, England. It is about the time when the group known as the Puritans, the Pilgrims, started. They meet together at Scrooby Manor. These are people that think for themselves. They went to Cambridge University. William Brewster invites his neighbors to come to his old manor house on Sunday to hear a man with a long white beard, Richard Clifton, preach. Sometimes when Pastor Clifton is not there, John Robinson preaches. John Robinson, who ended up being the pastor of the Pilgrims. After the service, William gives them bread and beer. He and his friends believe that any body of Christian believers may be a church, and that the minister is their bishop. That they are the churches, just like organized by Apostle Peter and Apostle Paul, and the others were just such churches. Among who come to hear Pastor Clifton preach is a boy from Austerfield, William Bradford. This is the same teenage boy, barely 16, when he joined the Separatist church that met secretly at Scrooby Manor. This is the young boy who took the voyage to the New World in the Mayflower. After barely turning 30, he found himself unanimously elected to the governor, being the second governor of Plymouth Colony after the untimely death of the Reverend John Carver. And it was William Bradford who began a career of leading the Plymouth Colony almost without interruption until his death in 1657, when he was at the age of 67. He was a calm and courageous leader who governed by the law. Well, as a young boy, he's here in this church learning under John Robinson and William Brewster, this non-conforming church. That the new king, King James, is bent on removing. They're banished, and now they're seeking safety in another country. They decide to go to Holland. So he and his friends, being molested, Sunday after Sunday, they still meet in the old manor house for worship. It's on March 24th in 1603 when Queen Elizabeth, who was 45 years old, had been Queen of England, and she draws her last breath. And now James of Scotland, through the descent of Margaret, is to become King of England. He is 36 years old. He is self-willed, very vain. He's a hypocrite. He's selfish. He's superstitious. He believes that the wrinkled old women sell themselves to the devil to bewitch the people. And he has been burning witches at a fearful rate, hanging, drowning, and burning them. He is not the only one who believes in witches. Everybody believes that witches should be put to death. It's the spirit of the age. There are several hundred ministers in England who desire purer ways in the church. They've read the Bible, and they sent a petition to James asking if there could be a new order of things. Well, he grants them an audience at the Hampton Court where they begin to present their plea, but he interrupts them abruptly and says, "I will have one doctrine, one discipline, one religion. I alone will decide. I will make you conform, or I will harry you out of the land, or else do worse, I will hang you." The bishops are delighted, and the king is greatly pleased with himself, and he says, "I have peppered them soundly." He issues a proclamation requiring everybody to conform to the church of which he is the head. What shall the men and women who meet in the old manor house at Scrooby do? They value life, but principle is worth more than property or life. They love their country, but liberty is worth more than country. They will sell their lands, bid goodbye to old England. They will find refuge in Holland, where, since the Spaniards had been driven out years before, men may think and live in decency, not as individuals, but as a church, a body of Christian believers. And they go. Why not go to the New World, they think, beyond the Atlantic? There's much talk about Virginia just now, its delightful climate, its fertile soil, its fruits and flowers, and inexhaustible riches. But the king will not let them go. No Englishman shall transport himself to Virginia without a license. That is the king's proclamation. He will not even permit them to find a home, nor will he let them go to Holland. He wants to control their very lives, but William Brewster and his friends resolve to leave England secretly. And they head out to the old town of Boston and take a vessel to Amsterdam. Brewster has been there and so makes all arrangements. The shipmaster promises to take them, but they make provisions and they sell their lands, pack their goods, and make their way over the meadows and marshes to Boston. They pass through the narrow streets and go on board the ship. But little did they know that they are doomed to disappointment, because the captain himself is a traitor, and he has informed the constable that they are trying to escape. They put him in prison for 6 months. But William Brewster resolves to make another attempt to reach Holland. And this time he bargains with the Dutch skipper to take him and his friends on board. One by one, the people leave their homes. The women and children go in a boat. The winds are high and they are tossed by the waves, suffering from seasickness. The men carrying heavy packs make their way through the marshes, and they reach the appointed place, but no ship in sight. The boat runs into a creek for shelter, and those on board are the miserable plight, sick, weary, disappointed, disheartened, with no home behind them. All day, all night, they lie there. The morning dawns and their hearts are joyful, for there is a ship riding at anchor off the shore just a little distance. The women and children have spent the night on the land, but the ship's small boats come in and they carry their goods on board. Some of the men are on the ship, some on the land, and when a troop of men come rushing over the sandhills, they're armed with spears and guns. The bishop's officers are upon them. Those on the shore are seized. Again, the woman brutally assaulted. The Dutchmen, seeing the commotion, are afraid that his ship will be seized and himself thrown into prison. So he hoists the anchor, he spreads the sails and steers away. Again, another door has closed. It's a sad hour. Husbands and wives are separated. Families may never meet again. William Bradford, he's on board the ship and he's only 19 years old, and he gives this account of the scene. Pitiful it was to see the heavy care of these poor women, what weeping and crying on every side. Some for their husbands carried away in the ship, others not knowing what should become of them and their little ones. Others melted in tears, seeing the poor little ones hanging about them, crying for fear and quaking with cold. The ship, instead of reaching Holland in a few hours, is caught in a tempest. A storm driven nearly all the way to Norway. For 7 days and nights, Those on board see neither sun, moon, or stars. The water's rough. Many times they fear that their last hour has come. After being tossed about for 14 days, they are safely landed at Amsterdam. In fact, they are the only boat that makes it through the storm. Hundreds of other boats are sunk. Now, what shall the officers do with the women and the children? To imprison them because they were going with their husbands and fathers? That cannot be thought of. The people will not permit it in England. No use to send them back to Scrooby or Austerfield where they have no homes. They could only set them at liberty. King James will gain nothing by keeping them in England. And so after many delays, they are permitted to make their way to Holland to join their husbands and their fathers. And being in Holland begins this new life. It was hard, but at least they had jobs and they could make their way. And this was the beginning of what would eventually become to the journey on the Mayflower ship 12 years later to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the beginning of the United States of America.